This is annoying. I don't, listen, when you don't know something, it's hard.
We will be starting within 3 to 4 minutes.
I think so. If it's mute, that means he can't hear me, right?
Right.
If it's unmute, then he can. Okay.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Alan Bernstein. I'm the Adult Programs Coordinator at Maywood Library and movie house aficionado. Tonight, I'm going to go through some of the movie theaters, not only within Bergen County, but in the outlying area, to show you what they used to look like, as opposed to the 12 plexes and 10 plexes and cookie cutter stuff that we have now. And so I'm going to go through it. What you were hearing as you came in, if you saw it, was something that was prevalent in the old days. I won't call it the old days because I'm one of the old people. But that was a pipe organ, which many places had shown there. And what I'd like to do at this moment, let me get it up on the screen and we'll get started. I'm going to go through what we're going to cover. Whoop, I didn't want to get out of that one. No, I don't need the music again. That's okay. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit what you saw. Here a second ago. It should not now be music, hopefully. Well, it shouldn't have been. There we go. Is everybody able to see what's on the screen, right? I just want to make
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
And if you have your popcorn like I'm choking on right now, feel free to eat it. This is actually the interior, and some of you may have been there already, of the Lafayette Theater in Suffern. And as you can see right up here is a gentleman who, once we get the theaters open again, plays the organ before some showings of older movies. They have a series, or they had a series when movie theaters were fully open on Saturdays that ran in the fall and also ran in the spring, where they had movies at 11 o'clock, and they, excuse me, he played beforehand. You had movies like It's a Wonderful Life. You may have had a Thin Man movie. You have some horror classics or scary movies like Poltergeist. And he would do about a half-hour set prior to the movie going on. But the Lafayette is still a one-screen movie theater, which is typical. I mean, this picture is a view from the balcony. And when he's playing, and on both sides, you did have what I'll call booths or balcony seats where just a couple people, sort of like what Lincoln sat in when on Ford Theater, but this was typical of many of the theaters that I visited as I was growing up. I was born in 1950, which makes me 71. And I spent some of my time in New York City and then moved growing up in Paramus. I now live in Emerson and I've also lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. And after getting married, I lived in Hackensack. But what we're going to do tonight, we're going to look at some of the theaters, the way they were, what's there now. May not have pictures of that, but I can explain to you what's there now. How they grew or met their demise. And we're not just gonna, I can't cover all the theaters in Bergen County. There's just so many of them. But what we're gonna count, as many as I could get up so you didn't fall asleep to the presentation. If you have any questions, there'll be a slight intermission. You could hold it then. You could ask your questions then, or if you, at the end, you can ask your questions then. If it's a pressing question, feel free, please, to interrupt me. I'm going to explain the theater, what it was, and most of them I had been in. Most of them are gone now. As I said, that's a marquee right here of what a theater used to look like. I grew up when I spent my first 5 years in New York City and Manhattan in the Washington Heights area. And close to where we lived were two theaters. They're on 181st Street. This was the Coliseum Theater. And further downtown at 175th, which I'll show you afterwards, was the Loews or Lowe's Theater, as they called it. Some people called it Loews, some people called it Lowe's. But this was typical of what a marquee looked like. I mean, if you've been to some of your marquees these days,
Washington Heights?
Washington Heights in Manhattan. So it's.
Oh, I thought it was just Bergen County.
No, I'm just explaining something, and then we're going to do Bergen County. As I said, I just wanted to give you a little background of what theaters look, and this was one of the best marquees. But the next slide shows you what a theater in New York and in some parts of New Jersey looked like. This is cavernous. You have a balcony. You have a big whoops.
Alan, can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
For some reason, there is no link at the Maywood Library website to actually Zoom. I'm on the phone.
Okay,
But I can't.
I'll give it to you right now if you hold on. Are you got a pen and a pencil, or a pen or a pencil?
Well, I
should
could
have
just.
been
Where, what website am I going to?
No, you just go on to Zoom. There's not a direct link, but I can give you the Zoom ID.
Okay, so I have to be at Zoom. www.zoom.
Yeah, you should go into. I'll give it to you in a second.
Sorry.
If you do a Google search on Zoom, and then
Yeah, Zoom US. Okay, I got it. Okay.
And here's the meeting ID with no password.
Okay, one second. Give me 1 second here.
You bet.
I don't understand why it's not at the library website.
It usually is on the library website, or it's in our newsletter.
All right, I am now at Zoom, the company itself, and I need to go to what link there?
Okay, you ready?
Yeah, but no, where am I going to key this in? I'm at
you should have
Zoom
something
website.
where you want to say join a meeting.
Okay, I see it. Right. Okay, join a meeting. Meeting ID. Okay,
Right.
so I'm going to key in
859.
Now, but wait a minute, there's a problem. Why is there no link? It's not.
It should allow you to put in the number.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry. Starting with
859 45 42 4021.
21.
Correct.
And click join. Open, launch meeting.
Hildegard
It
here. I
says
see
the
you, and
the
I'm
host.
admitting you now.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank
All
you.
right.
Sorry to interrupt everybody,
Oh, no, don't
but
worry
I
about, always
couldn't
here
get
to
it to
help.
work.
Yeah, usually it's on that website, but I don't know why it was not. But as I was saying,
Okay, thank
let's
you.
go back. You bet. This was typical of a movie theater. This is, as I said, I'm talking just about a couple theaters in Washington Heights before I come to Bergen County. If your audio's on, I ask that you mute it because I get reverb, but if you have a question, you can turn it back on. But this is typical, big stage. You had balcony seats, and you had the orchestra seats, but very ornate. And that was the Coliseum on 181st Street. This was the theater that was closer to my house. This was on 175th Street. That whole building housed a movie theater. It was on 175th and 176th Street. And it was a Lowe's theater, or Loews, as I said. It has since become owned by the City of New York and has landmark status. It's used for a spiritual and nonprofit cultural and performing arts center. And if you look down here, that is still the original marquee. And this is the movie theater where I dragged my mother out. She had taken me when I was little, I'd say 3 or 4, to see The Wizard of Oz. No, not when it first came out in 1939, but in the 50s. And everything was fine and dandy until they were in Munchkinland, and The Wicked Witch of the West came out and scared the hell out of me, and I wouldn't stop screaming and dragged my mother out. I cannot remember if I did get a spanking, but I kind of doubt it. This is the inside of that theater. I mean, it's amazing what they have in there. I mean, look, the lighting, the ceiling. If you look at the ceiling, I don't know. I don't think it's pressed tin, but it's amazing. This is like what you'd see on a Broadway theater, but I think upscale. Even you had carpeting down the middle here of the orchestra. And so that's the theater I went to. And one of the first theater I had showed you, which was the Coliseum, was uptown on 181st Street. And just an aside story, I have a friend who I have met in 1967 when we both lived in Paramus. And so I've known him now 54 years. Unbeknownst to either of us until we got older, I'd say maybe 4 years, 5 years after we met, he used to go to the Coliseum. I used to go to the Lowe's on 175th Street. And if you've all traveled over the George Washington Bridge, there's a street that's divided by the bridge. It's called Pinehurst Avenue. Well, I lived on South Pinehurst Avenue, and my friend Fred lived on North Pinehurst Avenue. So we didn't know each other in the 50s until the late 60s, but we lived on the same street and pretty much went to the same theaters. So this is the first theater two theaters we're going to talk about. This is Hackensack. These are theaters that have been around or were around for a long time. And this is facing north on Main Street. Here is the Fox Theater. Here is the Oritani. And Oritani is from an Indian word, Chief Oratam. And if you notice here, is where offices of the Bergen Record used to be. Then they moved to River Street. And now they are out in Passaic County. The building on River Street is no longer there. So I spent a lot of time in both of these theaters. And after I was married in 1974, my wife Pat and I saw things at the Fox, such as The Sting, and other movies there. I had spent a lot of time at the Oritani because everything was in walking distance. But you don't see signs like this anymore. Everything, again, is cookie cutter. You've got, you have the marquees down here, and there is one, you can't really see it well in this picture here, but these went up to the skies, and you could see it from down the end of Main Street on north and south. This was the Fox. And this is a picture from the 1960s. The Fox opened in 1931 and it closed in 1981 and has since been demolished. It got demolished, I think, in the late 90s, 98 or 99. But you can see, you can tell by the dress of the people. You can tell by what's playing. It's Rock Hudson, Doris Day, and Tony Randall in Lover Come Back, which is a 1960s movie. King and I and Carousel, they must have been doing a limited run because those are 1950s movie. But you have something you don't see too often. There's a couple of theaters. Tenafly still does it. Bergenfield used to, but you had the ticket booth right outside here. Then you had your entrance, and then you walked up at the Fox. You kind of walked up an incline to get to the concession area and to get to your seats. Little side story, that's my optician for years, who are no longer there, Petzold. My parents went there for their glasses, and I went for my glasses, and a lot of people went there for glasses, but that also is no longer there. And it's on the same block. If you were to go if you remembered where, Arnold Constable was, it's in that area. Right there, and this would be on the west side of Main Street. This is an interior of the Fox Theater from 1932. And this is again taken from the balcony, but this should remind you of some of the theaters when you saw the New York one. That's why I put the New York theaters in there. Not only did you have this big chandelier here, but you had a beautiful, and I'm not sure what it was, but it's a decoration. I don't know if it's parquet or it's tin or whatever it is. But you had a movie theater. It's the kind of place you could show shows, live shows on. And I'm sure they did it, but I didn't find any. But everything was very ornate and it stood out. And not only did you have the theater, today when you go to a movie, and if you have to use the restroom, it's sort of like nothing out of the ordinary. But in many of the theaters, this was up on, whatever they had a mezzanine, this is the waiting area outside the restrooms. You had places you could sit. Again, the lighting didn't look like your everyday lighting. The carpeting, you had drapes. You even had, it looks like a vase up here or some type of artwork. And many of them did have artwork up on there. So, it was a place you could actually sit and wait for your partner to come out of the restroom or before you went home. You do not see that when you go to the AMC in Garden State Plaza or anything like that. And on the other side of the street was the Oritani. Now, the Oritani, as I said, it opened in 1926. And it was around a long time. Some thought it was the poorer sister of the Fox Theater, but it was along the same level as the Fox. The marquee is showing Sean Connery, who passed away last year, and You Only Live Twice. So we know it's a James Bond movie from the 1960s. And these theaters were prevalent and heavily used, and people came to them a lot, when they opened and until they were closed. These were really never divided. But when you went to a movie, and if those of you who are old enough to remember this, when you go to a movie today, all right, it's showing at 1, 3:30, 6, and 8 o'clock, or 8:30. When you went to a movie, they did have start times, but you had a lot for the $1.50, $2 that you were paying back. If I looked up in 60s, 66, I think it was $2 or so to get to a movie. Okay, so if you got there and it was a 12 o'clock start, and you would see a cartoon, you might see a short. In the Oritani Theater, I several times saw the same short. It was called Wintertime in Tyrol. It showed us what people did in the Alps during the wintertime. You saw the main feature and you saw a second feature. So you could spend many hours there watching it. But the good thing was that I liked is that if you were late, the movie started at 1 o'clock and you showed up at 1:30, you could just walk in. Now you're behind the movie already, so you sit through the movie, you sit through the second feature, and then you just sit there. When everybody or whoever came on time leaves, they're going to run everything again. You sit there. They didn't chase you out. They did have ushers at that time, but they didn't chase you out because you came late. You saw the cartoon, you saw the short, and then you watched the movie up, if you wanted to leave, up until the time you came in, and then you would leave. These days, they kind of clear out the theaters, at least when I've been in them, when the feature ends. And if you watch old films, like film noir. You know, somebody's always hanging out in the movie theater and they hang out there through all the movies. You could possibly do it back then. I haven't tried it now, but you know, I have no reason to. As I said, this opened up in 26. It closed in 83. Both are you have no knowledge that they were there. I don't even know if there's a plaque, but here's the inside. That's the inside of the Oritani. Not as glitzy, shall we say, as the Fox Theater, but you did have, I mean, you see this kind of chandelier and design in many legitimate theaters. I'm not sure if these boxes were, I haven't remembered, and I'm trying to find out if they actually, people sat there. But again, you had an orchestra and you had a balcony. So the Fox and the Oritani were probably the most prevalent theater, and I did find an ad. When the Fox, here's the Oritani right here, here's the theater, how it looked in 1926 when it opened, and a quarter of a century later, there's the marquee. You do see here that you had the sign going up, but they talked about, you know, okay, we've been around for 25 years, 25 million people have come there. One thing that was big, you know, as from 25 to 51 was the cooling plant. You know, you saw air cooled, you saw air conditioned. They provided that. You also had in many theaters, even in Fox and Oritani, you had, you went through the 30s and the 40s, you had serials on Saturdays. So you might go see Flash Gordon, and it was a 15-minute short, and you would come back the next week and you would see the continuation to see what happened when, you know, Ming the Merciless was trying to kill Flash, or they may have giveaways, you know, dish night and things like that. So, I mean, you know, that's $1 million a year, which was good. So that was it. That was the two theaters that were the main focus in Hackensack. Growing up in Paramus, I spent a lot of time, obviously, in there. And this was what's called the Century Theater. Looks completely different than every theater we've seen so far. In the background is Garden State Plaza. This is Route 17 over here. Square sign, not square architecture. It opened in 1965. They closed it in 2006 after they made it into a twin, I believe. And they completely knocked it down in 2007. I went there a lot with friends, and one story is, this is where, if you're familiar with Stephen King and his book, The Shining, this is where I saw The Shining with Jack Nicholson, and my wife and I went to a late showing with another couple who lived in Hillsdale at the time. And if you came out the front and you went over to this area here, there was parking. You had parking here and you had parking here. Parking here, and there's some residential housing. We came out, and as with most Stephen King books, the movie was scary. If you've seen The Shining, it's not a comedy. We came out and we were going to the car, and as we got, I was driving, as we got to the car, my friend, there were some dogs barking, or they were quiet. We got to the car and they started barking loudly. They could have been German Shepherds or Doberman Pinscher, but it made my friend jump and get in the car quicker than he wanted to. But I think that was the outcome of the movie. what's there now, if you go down Route 17, there is an on-the-border Mexican restaurant there. I mean, it doesn't look this way here anymore. The mall has changed significantly over the years, but the interior, now that's quite a bit different than what you saw in the Fox Theater, the Oratani Theater, and maybe some of the other theaters we'll see. I mean, the walls are nondescript. The lighting, you don't see any chandeliers. You just see lights. It does have a balcony, but everything seems to be square. You know, it's just, obviously you go there to see a movie, the main focus of it, but it's always nice to have some atmosphere. The one thing, if you look at the seating, if you go to a movie theater now, you will sit in comfy chairs, the ones that recline, the ones that rock, the ones that are nice and plush. I can't stand those. I don't know, you know, not that I will fall asleep in them, but these chairs here, whoops, as I hit the wrong thing, so excuse me again. With straight back chairs, the kind you'd find the gum underneath the seat if your hand went down there, which it shouldn't. They were not meant for comfort. They were not the widest of chairs. They were just, you know, I can pack in this many more. And that's what all the older theaters were. Now, as I said, you have the comfy chairs, and now you also have the movie theaters where you can have dinner at the same time. This, I found an ad when they turned it into a twin. This was in 1971. Again, it was called the Century Theater. Of these two movies that were playing, they had a double feature in one. I never saw The Touch with Elliott Gould. I did see Woody Allen's Take the Money and Run. And I never saw Sidney Poitier in the organization. But they always, you know, stressed, both in color, mature, ample parking, obviously ample parking. But this was when they twinned the theater to make it into two, this is a ad from that time. There was another theater you may or may not be familiar with. This was at Bergen Mall. This was a movie theater at Bergen Mall. It wasn't typical of your Fox or your Century Theater. It was more of artsy films, shall we call it, independent films. It opened in 1960. And it closed, if I remember right, in about 85 or 86. This was, I said, in Bergen Mall, and it was, and I'll show you something in a little later, but it's the only movie theater that I have found in a location because that had not only this theater, the movie theater, but if you walk to the west end of the Bergen Mall, and if you remember, Bergen Mall was not, now Bergen Town Center, but Bergen Mall was not always enclosed. If you walk to the west end, you had Playhouse on the mall. Playhouse on the Mall was a legitimate theater. They would do plays that either had already played on Broadway or might have a tryout, so you would get known stars to come there. So you could go see a movie while you're at the mall, or you could get tickets to go see a legitimate show. And they did do some musicals, but most were straight plays. But the Mall Theater opened in 1960. And again, every time a theater opened, It came out with a big ad, first time. The movie that played, I don't know if anybody's seen it, I have. It's a Peter Sellers movie called The Mouse That Roared. But it showed a lot of foreign films or independent films. You would not see a World War II epic like The Longest Day in this movie. You would see maybe an Ingmar Bergman movie there. You might see a British movie there. But as for The Mouse That Roared, if you haven't seen it and you have a streaming service, it might be available, or you might look on the library's Buckle services and see it. It was a funny movie, as most Peter Sellers were. But the inside, again, this is the only thing I could find. You'll notice the vending machines. If you go to a movie theater these days, chances are you might see some vending machines. But you have the big concession stands. And one of the vending machines, and I'm not sure this one is it, but they did sell cigarettes out of the vending machines there. But here is the inside of the theater. It was smaller. It had somewhat of a balcony. There's the balcony here. And this is the balcony here, so looking down towards where the theater is. But it was it wasn't that big a theater. They didn't expect to get 1,500 people for a movie, so they didn't make it. And space was at a premium at the mall. I'll stop here for a second and ask if there's any questions or comments. If not, I'll keep going. But if you do, please feel free to ask. Okay.
Hi, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I'm enjoying also your anecdotes, and when you told me about going to see The Wizard of Oz, the story with your mom, I thought that was so funny. I was actually roaring with laughter.
I'm glad you liked it. The one thing I find funny about that movie is the witch scared me because if you remember the movie, I've been told this, the witch is green. Her face is green. I'm colorblind. How did I know her face was green? She just scared me. But again, this may have been like 1953 or 1954. So at least I didn't cost my mother $16 or something, dragging her out of the theater. I've been to the movies so long, I have a lot of stories, but I'm not going to bore everybody with them. This is a theater, the Highway. It's in Fair Lawn, or it was in Fair Lawn. It was right on Route 4. Actually, if you come down Route 4 through Paramus, where it splits for 208 and 4 keeps going towards Patterson, it becomes Broadway. As you're going west, following that road, I don't know, I'd say a mile down the road, when it's for a mile and a quarter down the road, from where it splits, would have been the Highway Theater. It started in 1942. It opened as a single theater in 1942. And like many theaters to stay alive, in 1978, it turned into a twin theater. As you can see here, it's showing a Alden Alden movie and a Richard Pryor movie. Why I liked this picture that I was able to find of the Highway is because of right there. If you've ever gone or ever seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show, they did it at midnight in most theaters. And I didn't have
the Rocky Horror Show, that's right.
They, people would dress up and throw things and they knew all the lines. But I never knew that they had played it here. I knew they played it at some other theaters, but not here. This theater closed in 2007. And this is older picture of it when it was first opening. As you can see, we have Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine and Douglas, who they call Doug because they can't get in there, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and it was Gunga Din. So the theater opened in 42. Gunga Din came out in 39. So they must have had a special showing, or they had nothing going on that week. But this was a promotional card for the Highway Theater. And I especially like the sign, especially, with that. It's very modern as compared to the other one. That was the inside. So now we're going back, because it's an older theater, to the more decorative types. You can look at the design and the ceiling. The lighting isn't, anything fancy, but you have where the curtains are here. These would open to display the screen. And again, you had carpeting on the floor, and then you had I'm sure, some type of wallpaper. That building is now housing, not the theater, but they obviously redid everything. It's now a medical building. So you do not see many theaters once they meet their demise. They're either torn down or renovated for office suites or other things. You do not see movie theaters just being left the way they were and turned into something else. And at the Highway, this was the foyer, whatever you want to say, before you went into theater. So you probably had some type of concessions over there. What struck me about this was a couple things. The carpeting, but more so the mural. I can't make out the mural, all that. That looks like, obviously that's a person there. But it's looking like, to me, obviously it's ancient.
It's a painting.
Ancient, yeah. I mean, is it Egyptian? Is it Greek? Is it not Roman or something like that? But to think that something like that was in a movie theater, what happened to it when they got rid of the movie theater? It's sort of like, if you remember Alexander's department store in Paramus, they had the giant mural on the side. Well, when they knocked that all down, they took apart the mural and it's in storage someplace. But this is a work of art right here. And you kind of wonder what happened to it. The next movie theater is really ornate. That's the Rialto. That's the Rialto in Ridgefield Park. It looks like, I don't know, John Philip Sousa is going to be playing there. It opened in the 1900s. But you have the banners, you have the flags, so you're open. You have what was then typical of a theater. You had the signage there. Even where the marquee would be, the name of the theater is on 3 sides. It's got, I can't tell what that was, but it's got some, piping up there. But the rest of the building, it was into it. This is not the movie theater. This side is not. The movie theater was all right in here. So those were probably stores that was on it. It's more palace looking, or I don't know, something from the Ottoman Empire. Sorry. But if you take that, this was what it looked like years later. Completely different. This part's still there. But this is a picture from about 2005. It's just marquee's different. Everything looks different. There's nothing on the outside where you would buy it. It's sort of like a cookie cutter. The March of the Penguins was a documentary that was narrated by Morgan Freeman. The Rialto made it until 2008, but changed over the years. There was different types of movies owned by different owners. You know, RKO might own it, or other independent owners might own it. But that was the inside of the last part of the theater. A lot different than you see in the older movie theater. Smaller movie theater. Screen. I mean, it looks like it has some columns here, but the seats are still the old time seats. Those are square back seats. You know, no rocking, none of that. In the 90s is when it really changed from what I was able to find out. In the late 90s, it started showing Bollywood movies from India. That lasted a while. In the 2000s, it started to show art, foreign, and independent films. And it finally closed in 2008. And if you get a sense of what I've been showing you, there's very few single theaters around. And if you know, once we open up, it'd be nice to get to them. As I said, I didn't see every theater that I could get to. And I'll talk about a few that are not going to be shown, or you can mention some you've been to. One other one I found was the Park Lane in Palisades Park. Now, this obviously is a picture. The theater opened in 1927. It had 1,500 seats. And you can see up here, I mean, the theater you'd go in, but this is the, the auditorium for it. You can tell from the cars. You might be able to tell a little bit from the dress. But it looks like it's it says Ben-Hur and Pat I can't make sure if it says Pat O'Brien or what. But that's not the Ben-Hur from 1959 that Charlton Heston done. It may have been the Ben-Hur that was the first edition, Ben-Hur, or maybe the second, because the first one may have been silent. But it had 1,500 seats. So you had the marquee that came out. You had a ticket booth in here. And then here's the Park Lane of what it evolved in. You still have the auditorium here. The marquee is somewhat different. Here we've got Rocky IV playing. This is from '86. This is the year it closed. But it was twinned also. You had Rocky IV, and you had Youngblood, which was a hockey movie, a drama hockey movie. But it's completely different now. I mean, it says Adams. They must have done, I haven't found anything on that, but they must have called it the Adams movie, or the Adams movie theater, but people knew it as Park Lane, and you have Adams. And the last one that I actually have on this for this section of it was that I worked in Fort Lee in the 70s. And up on towards the bridge was the Lee Theater. It opened in the 50s. It also had 1,500 seats and had a balcony. But again, its marquee was a bit different. I'm sure the other side had the same thing. You had a ticket booth, but it was just, a squared off building with an auditorium. This is Stalag, so I'm not sure if this opened in the 50s, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. Stalag, no, it's okay, I have it. I'm sorry. Stalag 17 was a 1953 movie. William Holden won an Academy Award for his acting in that. But it was just part of the block. And it lasted for a while. I think it made it to about 1973 The problem in that section of Fort Lee, when they were redoing for housing and for the bridge access and everything like that, all these kind of buildings, whether it be a movie theater or it be Warnke's, which was sold, it must be a deli and ice cream, or shops this way or shops that way, were demolished. You have some housing there now, and you just have roads there now. This was the inside. Now this is a little nicer to me. I mean, it looks like it had orchestra, mezzanine balcony. You have sort of 3 levels in this. So it was a good sized theater, as I said. But again, the atmosphere wasn't there. And as the theaters got older, I remembered that you would, if you walked, and most of them were carpeted, you would see the carpets kind of get threadbare because they weren't going to, first of all, if they weren't drawing crowds, they're not going to work on the carpeting. Some of the chairs, also, you might have a broken seat. You might have arms on them broken, and those were not the first to get fixed. So at this point, I'm going to give you something. I hope you can. Oh, I forgot about this one. This was an ad I found that kind of showed what ads were like in newspapers back then. And this showed the Lee Theater. Here's the Lee Theater right here. And there's, again, Sean Connery as James Bond, who's also playing at a few drive-in theaters, which we're going to cover a bit. Sound of Music was out, so you know it's the early to mid-'60s. Jerry Lewis was playing in Washington Township, not the one that's there now. They've made it over. But this is the one that caught my eye here too, besides the movie theater. Here's the Playhouse on the mall that I mentioned before. So they did straight plays, and it had Cesar Romero. He was in many movies in the 40s and the 50s, and some people remember him as the Joker on the Batman TV series with Adam West. But you also had a playhouse in Tappan Zee, which was really in Nyack, I believe, and Paul Ford was a great character actor in many things, and they kind of grouped this all together in the entertainment section. And if you like stock cars, you can head up to the Orange County Fair Speedway in Middletown. So we're going to have a little intermission here, take your questions, and hopefully something goes off. So if you, whoop, I went too far. So any questions at this point before we move to the second part? Let me do this. And
I wanted to comment that
oops, sorry, hold on.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious food to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
You did not usually see or hear something like that except in drive-ins, which will be our second half of the presentation. But Samantha, that was you, I think, right, who had a comment or a question?
yes, thank you for the music though, for the old first of all for that. And you're bringing back. I haven't seen all these movies, but it's making me think of my mom because all the actors and the movies you're talking about, like Gunga Din. I remember my mom watched it. It was from like it looked like one of the first movies
It was 1939.
ever made. It was just, she loved it. She said, oh yes, it's such, a deep movie, but it was like so old. Like it was hard for me. It was so distracting because it looked so old.
And it was in black and white. I mean, that's the can't be any good.
It was like in black and black. It was
Black-
like just so serious.
Yes, but it was a good action movie. I mean, Victor McLaughlin and Cary Grant and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Gunga Din was played by Sam Jaffe, who later, Samantha, you're not old enough for this, but later was Dr. Zorba on the Ben Casey TV series. So, any other questions or comments?
I've been to some of the movie theaters you've talked about, and
Oh, good. I'm glad.
and I enjoyed going to them very much. The movies I saw, or either with my mom or a friend of mine, mostly very like fond memories, like the way you have like movie stories, makes you smile.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, these days you have to, if you stay away from, like I said, the 10 and the 8 and the 12 plexes. Tenafly has a movie theater. I don't know if they're in Washington Township. Westwood, right by me, everything's been twinned or triplexed or whatever. But they have one. You can find them. But after the pandemic and after theaters reopen, Ridgewood has one. I fear they may not come back. Well, part of my childhood, teenagehood, yeah, I guess so, was drive-ins. Anybody know where this is? Any guesses?
It's the Paramus Street. Paramus Drive-In.
Paramus,
I
right.
Paramus.
Yep,
Paramus.
this is Garden State Plaza right back here. This is Route 4. Route 4, let me see. No. Let me see, I'm going that way. It could be the Parkway.
That made the Parkway.
I think that's the Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the Paramus / Route 4 drive-in. That's Hackensack over here.
Right.
But this is all now a parking lot. This is all the parking lot, and some of the area is recreational area. This actually opened in 1947, and this gives you a good view of that. Most drive-ins were surrounded with trees. It had to have something. You didn't want all the light filtering in. You had projection, but you had your snack bar. Down in this area, if you had a playground, you could have the playground back here, and some of it had it way up front because the kids would play at the playground before it got dark. People would get there early because shows usually started at dusk. And so people, it's a night out with the family, pack them in the car and take them to the drive-in. The cost was nominal. They used to charge individual tickets as drive-ins sort of faded from. There's only one left in New Jersey now, down in South Jersey. I'll mention it. And if you want to go to a drive-in, you can go up to Warwick. But the cost was nominal, and then eventually, pack as many people you want in the car, and it's $10 a carload or whatever like that. You really didn't get first-run films. In most cases, you might get older films, but in most cases, you got a double feature. You have a whole night out. So this was the Paramus drive-in. And this was it was demolished in the 80s, but here's a typical ad for it. So, I mean, Doris Day and Ronald Reagan and the Winning Team was a baseball movie about Grover Cleveland Alexander. I'm not sure the year it came out. It was either the late 40s or in the 50s. So, and that would play for 3 days. And then on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you'd see this other double feature. This one has Yvonne DiCarlo, who later became Lily Munster, in it. And then on September 6th, Saturday, you had, that looks like Alan Ladd there. Yeah, it is Alan Ladd. And of course, they had short cartoons. You got the Three Stooges, you got Bugs Bunny cartoons. But as opposed to going to an enclosed movie theater, this was sort of like an adventure. I mean, you know, you could take the family, you could take, you know, the kids, you could take grandma and grandpa, you can get everybody in the car. And it was really cheap. As I was saying, right now in New Jersey, there's only one drive-in left. It's down in southern New Jersey. I think it's in Delcia or near Vineland. So if you really are hankering to go to a drive-in theater in New Jersey and you're in the Maywood area, you only have to drive 136 miles to get there. The closer one, and they have two screens, so you know you have your choices there of what to do. Some of the drive-ins, as they evolved, had more than one screen. They had them back to back, but they had a lot more property. The closer one, which is only 36 miles from here, is the one in Warwick. And that's been around a long time. And there used to be hundreds, I would say maybe 1,000 or more throughout the United States, but times have changed. This is another one close by. This was in the Route 17 drive-in, which was really in Upper Saddle River. To get people, it opened in '63. It closed in, actually closed in '75. Now there's a warehouse and an office building there. But we'll talk about more about what's on these poles here. But as you can see, again, woods around the outside. You had a screen, you know, it wasn't, you know, anything fancy. You're not getting Dolby sound in these kind of things. But they did a lot of promotions when this first opened. They had fireworks. And I think this one, from what I read in two different places, if they pack the drive-in theater, you could get about 1,000 cars in it. And again, best way to go to these was in a station wagon. You could get everybody and anybody in it. As a kid, there were two places in the drive-in I liked, and this is the only picture I could really find, but it wasn't haute cuisine. It wasn't fancy food. But if you look at the prices, man, they're pretty good. You have meatball submarines, hamburgers, had shrimp rolls, which I don't remember. But if you look at things for 45 cents or 50 cents or 30 cents, you tell me where you can get that now. I mean, you know, they were
Nowhere.
Nowhere, exactly. You can't even make it yourself.
No.
But if you went, it was like a cafeteria. You went through it, and you would, your hot dog, if you bought a hot dog, it would be wrapped up in, now I'm going to show my age, tin foil, aluminum foil, your hamburgers, and, you know, it's just like, you know, grind them out. But it was cheap food. Some people brought their own. They loaded up candy. They loaded up popcorn in their car. They had snacks in their car because it was going to be a late night. One of the other drive-ins I found, and I took this sign because Route 3 drive-in was in Rutherford. Sort of close. This was the old Giant Stadium right back here. It opened in '51 and closed in '82. This is Route 3, and 17 would be further up, so it's between there. This was a big seller back then, in-car heaters. If you have in-car heaters, you have the possibility to go year-round. I don't know why people would want to go to the drive-in, like on a night-to-night. But it lasted almost 30 years. It also did double features like everybody else. And one story I actually dug up, here's Route 3. The theater was over here. The screen was over here. So if you were on Route 3, and I remember driving past it, not for this incident, you could see what was on the screen. So, oh, let's see what's playing. You know, if you were a passenger, if you were a driver, you better watch the road. Back in 81, they were showing what they called then a teenage sex comedy. It wasn't pornographic, but it was a sex comedy. There was an actress. The name of the movie was Private Lessons. Well, in the movie, there was an actress named Sylvia Crystal, foreign actress. You may have heard of her. Well, she opens her blouse in the movie and bears it all. Not a kind of thing you would want to do in a drive-in theater. Well, supposedly there were squealing tires and honking horns from drivers who were on Route 3 as they drove by. I haven't confirmed that, but it's very possible because I remember being on Route 3 and being able to see the screen. Route 3 was a little, the Route 3 drive-in was also, and this is not a great picture, but these days you can get pay-per-view on your home provider. You can watch a fight, you can watch UFC, you can watch, now you can stream movies on it or first-run movie. It was a pay-per-view. They used to do those at drive-in theaters. And you'll notice you didn't sit in your car because you wanted to get close. This is from 1952. Rocky Marciano, who was wound up being the undefeated heavyweight champion. I'm not sure who he was fighting. They had what I was told, or what I've read in two places, they had 20,000 people there. So they made a good bunch of money, and they turned away 5,000 people. So they held special events for pay-per-views because you could get a lot more people in. You could drive in, maybe a Muhammad Ali fight, maybe something else as time went on than you could do in an individual theater. Yes, they did it in interior theaters too, but in drive-ins, as long as it was good weather and you could get close to the screen, it afforded more people the chance to see it. So we come back to these little things. Everybody knows what they are, correct? Those are the speakers.
Speakers.
Those are the speakers that worked half the time and didn't work half the
Didn't
time.
work, right?
Or you got one and it worked, but the volume knob didn't work. And if before we go to that, you notice the little ridges here, so you could put your car up, so you could be facing up. So that made you, or they wanted to make you, drive out your lane. So if you were on here, you would have to drive out your lane. Going over here and then over here, you'd be bump, bump, bump. But these speakers, pull it in, put it in your, on your window, roll up your window, or, however you want. And that's how you would get the speaker. You get the sound. These days, these faded away. People used to be able to tune it in on your FM radio, as long as you had an FM radio. But I've heard stories. I never did it. I swear they'll never convict me of this. Is that people who left, they pulled out without taking the speakers and those things snapped off. But there's the playground back here. And this is the snack bar area. So this playground was closer, and again, trees. Now this was either in spring or fall, maybe, or after the fact, because they're not budding out. And this is one of the playgrounds. This is, not sure where this was, but again, they did, and this is the only one I ever found. If you see the Good Humor, it's not a Good Humor Man, but here's a person in white. I believe they had an attendant there. Why, I don't know, because at that time, it's not like these days with playgrounds and safety and everything. Well, you got the big puddle here, so the kids can fall on that. These were metal slides. You had swings. And back here, if you look, if you remember, there were wheels where you would run around and jump on, and I could not get it because I have motion sickness. So I would, you know, if my parents put me on there after feeding me 3 hot dogs, they would be paying the price for it. But at least it had in the swing area sand and I don't know, whatever else, but they took care of it to some extent. Now, one drive-in that's close to my house is just outside Bergen County. You may have seen it. This was the Route 303 drive-in. It's in Orangeburg, New York, or was on Orangeburg, New York, on Route 303. So if you go through towns like Norwood, Northvale, and then you're into Tapan, New York, and you're in Orangeburg. It's right near the Palisades Parkway. My parents used to take us up there all the time. And it was like a trip to the country because, you know, wow, we're going someplace different for a change, not around town. The last time I was there, it's no longer there. If you remember the couple that I told you about who went to The Shining, well, they're good friends of ours. They now live in Delaware. My wife and I and the 2 of them went to see a double feature at the Route 303 Drive-In. The main feature was the Gong Show movie. Now, if you were old enough to remember the Gong Show, it was a TV show by Chuck Barris that had acts on it, weird acts, and somebody would be the big winner. But if they didn't like it, it was a Gong movie. But the second feature was better than the first feature. The second feature was Young Frankenstein. And as if you know already, Cloris Leachman passed away the other day, but she was in that movie. Well, that's one of my favorite movies. And so the movie starts. The first movie starts, the Gong Show, and we make it through there. And at that point, my wife's friend and I, who always joke together, my wife got in the back seat, her husband in the back seat, and the 2 of them just went to sleep. It was too late. It was like midnight or something. Well, my friend's wife, Wendy, and I know all the lines from Young Frankenstein. So for the next hour and a half while the movie was playing, we just kind of acted it out in the car. But that was the last time I was in there. It's no longer a drive-in, but this was their playground. As you can see, it's a nicer playground. It's got a fence around it, things like that. But, whoops, that's not what I wanted. So hold on, excuse me 1 second. I thought I had a slide in there. It's no longer, all right, so it's no longer a drive-in. It's a nursery, and the Orangetown DPW is there. But the sign lives on, and I think they have no plans to get rid of it. Now, this I wanted to show you. This, again, is typical of what the ads were like during intermission, things like that. But it takes a while to load, so here we go. Hopefully it loads. Come on, you can do it. Gonna make a liar out of me. Trying to load it. And when I practice it, it loaded just fine. But of course, it's not gonna.
That's always the way.
Yeah, it is always. You're absolutely.
It's always the way. Every time you want something to be done,
Oh, here we
something
go.
always. But there it goes. See it? Hold on.
Yes, sir. May I help you?
Oh, I'd like 2 of those, please.
Hot dogs? Yes, sir.
And 3 of those. And 1 of those. And 5 bars of these. And a cup of that nice hot liquid.
Coffee. Coming right up.
Oh, and 2 bags of those peculiar white puffy material.
You mean our crunchy popcorn? Shall I wrap that for you, sir?
Oh, that's all right. My saucer's just outside.
They come from miles to enjoy our intermission.
And that's it for this. I'd like to thank, any questions, any comments that you'd like to ask? I have one more thing to show you afterwards, but I would entertain anything you would like to say right now.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you have any info or memories about the Stanley Warner Theater in Paramus?
Yeah, the Stanley Warner was on Route 4. I think it's a fitness place now. I remember seeing a bunch of movies there. The last one I remember seeing wasn't old time. I saw the movie Gettysburg there, I believe. But yeah, I mean, we went there. It was a big square building, but I do remember going there, but I didn't go there that often. It was, it was nice. It was a nice big modern theater. And I'm sure there is information on the internet about it. But now there's, as I said, it's, I believe, a fitness place.
As I recall, it was one of the earliest multiplex theaters.
Yeah, you're
in
right
our
about
county.
that. Yeah, you're definitely right about that. I remember standing in line outside for tickets. I remember just vaguely the inside. But I do remember the building. You couldn't miss it if you were driving from
Right.
Forest Avenue east on Route 4. It stood out.
Yep.
I mean, Paramus had a lot of theaters. It had the Stanley Warner, it had the Century, it had the Mall Theater. If you're going between Forest Avenue and Route 17, between Spring Valley Avenue and Route 17, in that little shopping center to the right, there was Cinema 35.
That's right.
And I was there several times, so and then you had the drive-ins too, but there were a lot of them, and they survived a long time, but you think once they started twinning and multiplexing, it really became the death knell for the independents. I mean, they couldn't afford the rent. So what I'd like to, any other questions before I show you one more thing?
Well, yes, what
Sure.
you were saying about the drive-ins, I guess I have memories, or my parents were before I could remember, because they thought it was great when they were new parents, because they could take me and our dogs, which were well behaved, and pack us. We were little. They would pack like a meal, and they would put us like in baskets, and they would go to the drive-in theater, and they
And
didn't
they-
have to worry about a babysitter. and we
Exactly,
could-
you're saving babysitter money. That's just it.
Yes.
And you got entertainment. If you were old enough, you got to go to the playground.
No, I was too little. I fit in a picnic basket, I think.
As long as they didn't leave you behind.
And then I guess maybe for TV fans also that might have seen or remember, they referred to classic movie theaters in a Seinfeld episode where they wanted to buy a movie theater. And it was because it was so old, they were trying to save it, and there was like jokes through the whole thing, and the food was there for like 40 years, but they were still eating it, and it was just, it was a hysterical episode that like could bring tears to your eyes, I thought.
There have been some tries by people to bring back smaller theaters. I know in Westwood you have what used to be called a Pascack. I don't know if it's called a Pascack anymore, but on Tinderkamak they tried putting a little movie theater that would show classics. Bogart, Edward G. Robinson, Katharine Hepburn. Didn't work out very well. It was a small space. People really didn't come, which is unfortunate. And I'm not sure, I should have looked this up, but on Cedar Lane in Teaneck, you had the Cedar Lane Theater. And I'm not sure if you have to, I think it's still there, but I don't know
Yes,
if it's
privately owned,
privately owned. Yeah,
privately owned, yes.
it's tough for independent theater owners, especially these days, because they're not open, but to make money. Any other questions?
Well, also, I guess quickly there, I had seen a newspaper article, I think maybe earlier this month. There's one that I've been to, but not for a while, that's closed now. I think it's in Upper Montclair, and I think people bought it, and they've been trying to open it. And they said, well, no, we're not going to open it now, but you know, that they had fundraising and everything. It's pretty close to Montclair State University.
Yeah, no, I read the article too. I can't remember the name of the theater. Not the Bellevue. I'm not sure, but I did see that article too. I mean, you know, theaters, some of them need renovations, and that's expensive. Getting for, you know, and again, people, gee, I'm going to go to the movies, but then we'll go to the mall, then we'll go to dinner. Well, everything is one when you go to the multiplexes.
Well, I think they said in the article that they was going to be more than just like a theater. They were going to, there's supposed to be like other things in it, so people could
Right.
like do more.
Well, that's what these let's have dinner in the movie theaters are about. There's one in Closter by me. There's one, I believe, in Hackensack at the mall in Hackensack. There's one, and I can't think of the mall for some reason, but
At Riverside, yes.
at Riverside.
That's
thank you.
AMC, that's an AMC, I believe.
Yeah, but they do serve dinner in one of the theaters.
Yes,
So
I've
it's
been
like-
there, it's very nice.
Is it
It's
nice?
Very nice.
So,
Yes, very,
I mean,
very,
yeah,
very nice.
you're looking, you know, I want a full package of entertainment. I don't want to just go to the movies and have my Raisinets or Jujubes.
Right,
I'm going to have dinner and a movie. All right, so two things I want to mention. First thing is, this is the start of the Nostalgia series I'm going to be trying to do every month or two. I'm going to be doing one in February, and it will be about, let's call it shopping. There are a lot of, that I remember, a lot of stores that are no longer there. And I'm not going to really talk about restaurants. I can do that another time. But I used to, when I was married, and I used to, excuse me, live on Clinton Place in Hackensack. I used to walk to Packard's, right on Main Street, if you remember Packard's.
right, right.
So that's going to be one of them, but I'm going to be doing, I've started researching it now. So late February, we're going to have another one of these. And I've come up with a few other ideas. So we're going to be doing Nostalgia series. But what I wanted to show you, in case you're interested, this is next Thursday. I have someone I have someone doing a presentation, gentleman named Lou Del Bianco. Lou his grandfather was the chief carver for Mount Rushmore. And he does a presentation where he acts as, you know, he's his grandfather. Lou has does a lot of presentations for schools, for groups. He does a Lincoln presentation. Actually, they used him. I saw a clip online of Lou as Abraham Lincoln on the Tonight Show. They were doing a skit, and he was Lincoln on there. But he does a very nice show. He's out of Port Chester, New York. And this will be next Thursday at 7 o'clock. So if you're interested, I urge you to come. Just one other one I will hype for March. I don't know how many people still listen to radio, but I do. and morning shows. I grew up listening to John Gambling on WOR. And now in the mornings on WR, they have Len Berman, who is a former sportscaster, and he has a partner, Michael Riedel, who is a Broadway critic and author. Well, I wound up on the show earlier this month in the trivia contest. I was Len's partner, and we won, but I talked to Michael Riedel off the air, and he has agreed in March 4th to do a Zoom interview with me. We'll talk about many different things. He'll take questions. So if you're interested in Broadway, if you're interested in critics, if you're just interested in seeing something different, probably later in February, you will see some information on that. Otherwise, together. And I hope when we do our next one, the end of February, that you'll attend also. Finally, any other questions? Well, I hope you all keep warm.
I want to thank you for
Stay away
bringing me
from
down
the
to memory lane. It was beautiful, very nice,
I
very informative,
I
and
like
it brought
going-
back a lot of memories of my childhood.
Yeah,
too.
I like doing that. So I'm a big, nostalgia person. So.
Oh, they were special times. They
makes
still
me-
are.
Yeah, no, they are definitely special times, and it makes me feel younger, so that's good.
We're young.
So
we're young.
I hope you. I wish. But yeah, it's true. I'm healthy. If you can get your vaccine, I'm scheduled middle of February. Get it.
Done that
and
already. Done the one.
You're lucky. I got scheduled for the 19th.
Yeah,
So
I'm waiting for my second one. I have to go back in February.
good for you. And we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Night.
Bye.